All right, welcome to Main Street Books virtual Zoom room. I'm so thrilled tonight to welcome you to the very first of our spring 2021 Monday Night Spotlight series. This is a new series at Main Street Books that is built to highlight the talent that is right in our backyards. So I'm so thrilled today on International Women's Day to welcome three local writers whose lives and stories are really something special. And conveniently, they have all chosen to written memoirs about their stories in the last year or so. And so my name is Beth. I'm the events manager here at Main Street Books. And on behalf of Ada and the staff, welcome. We're so glad that you are here. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our three incredible women. First, we have Hope Andersen. Hope, if you want to wave, hello. There she is. Hope is an author, a poet, and a coach who is drawn to stories of transformation in both fiction and in life. A firm believer in the possible, she also presents a realistic approach to dealing with life on life's terms. She lives in Mooresville with her husband of more than 30 years, Tom, and her three grown children, 2 dogs and a cat. She has degrees from Wellesley College and Yale Divinity School and began writing novels. This is quite an inspiration. In 2015, at the age of 60, her debut novel, The Book Sisters, was self-published in November of 2017. A subsequent novel, When the Moon Winks, Warren Publishing, was released in May 2019. She's published both stories and poems, and her poetry chapbook, Taking in Air, was released in November 2018. Since 2015, she has also been commissioned to adapt 2 books into feature-length screenplays. We'll hear from her momentarily, but we're also joined tonight by Adiba Barney. Hi, Adiba. Adiba has had a life filled with both tough challenges, great achievements, and tons of fun adventures and joy. From being a child of war to fleeing Lebanon on a smuggler's boat to being an immigrant in Sweden. And then her over 2-decade-long career in the tech and startup industry took her from Stockholm, Sweden to San Francisco and Silicon Valley in early 2011, where she became the youngest CEO of the Silicon Valley Forum in its 30-plus-year history. And also, as a woman in a very male-dominated field, she knocked down a lot of glass doors, windows, and ceilings on her way. She survived stage 1 breast cancer twice at ages 27 and 30, only to find herself diagnosed with the terminal stage 4 metastatic breast cancer at age 37. On October 26, 2018, after trying and hoping for 15 years, Adiba finally became a mother after she and her husband were matched with a superhero surrogate. She has to date lived with metastatic breast cancer, or MBC, for almost 6 years and is a fierce advocate for the MBC community through her volunteer work at Mediviver. She's on her 4th line of treatment and has had 7 surgeries and too much radiation to count. Despite dealing with tough side effects on a daily basis, she has a passion for educating the public on MBC. Adiba has received HERS Breast Cancer Foundation's Empowerment Award in 2016 and the Susan G. Komen San Francisco's Make a Difference Award in 2017. A note that proceeds from the sales of her book tonight will go to Mediviver Metastatic Breast Cancer Research. She lives right here in Cornelius with her beloved husband, Chris, and her young son, Alex, and a crazy little dog, right? And finally, we have Nesha Pai. Nesha is the founder of Pai CPA, PLLC, here in Charlotte, North Carolina. She graduated magna cum laude from NC State University and has held her CPA license since 1996 after passing her first attempt on the exam as a senior in college. She began her career and cultivated her passion for helping businesses within the world-renowned accounting firm Arthur Andersen, and later within multiple privately held Fortune 500 companies as a business consultant, relationship facilitator, and accounting analyst. She realized she had a strong pull towards small businesses in the entrepreneurial sector. And so since starting her own firm in 2011, Nesha has continued nourishing her vision in the business growth of the Queen City by creating Pi Networking Group in 2017 and launching a podcast series, Piece of the Pie, very clever, that focuses on successful Charlotte entrepreneurs sharing their business insight. She's been a Charlotte resident since 1993 and recently was named as one of the top 50 most influential women of 2020 in the Mecklenburg Times. And I want to also introduce, before we move on, there are 3 books. They're beautiful books. Hope's is How to Remodel a Life, a guide to living well with alcoholism and bipolar disorder. Adiba's is When Life Hands You Cactuses, Make Margaritas. And finally, Nesha's book is Overcoming Ordinary Obstacles, Boldly Claiming the Facets of an Extraordinary Life. So I'm going to turn the stage over to them to each speak about their book and do a short reading, and then I'll ask each a couple of questions. In the meantime, please engage with the chat. We're so glad you're here to hear from these local writers, and you can put your questions in writing, and then I will answer, or I'll field some of them for our authors at the end of the program. Thanks for being here, and Hope, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. First, I'd like to thank you, Beth, and the staff of Main Street Books for hosting this event. I'm so glad that you invited me, and I really appreciate being here. In the past year of the COVID epidemic, we've seen mental illness escalate. Depression and anxiety, insomnia and fear, alcoholism and suicidal ideation have risen in youth and adults alike. People have given up hope. These are not generally uplifting subjects, yet in my book, How to Remodel a Life, a guide to living well with alcoholism and bipolar disorder, I managed to give a positive twist to an otherwise negative subject. The key is living well, knowing that there is hope. I dedicated this book to anyone who has the courage to change their life for good, because that is what it will take: courage, willingness, and above all, resilience to make this journey. Using the metaphor of rebuilding a home, I take the reader through the steps of rebuilding a life, all the while referring to my own years of active alcoholism and my subsequent 39 years of continuous sobriety. The first step begins with the debris that accompanies any reconstruction project. This is a pervasive dust worthy of Steinbeck. It is monumental dust consisting of waste from insects and critters, gypsum from drywall, and lead particles from paint. It insinuates itself into everything from the cracks in the floorboard to your front teeth. In human terms, this would be the emotional debris of our past. Taking responsibility for our part in that past and recognizing that emotional debris will constantly arise as we continue on our journey is essential to the task. So how do we handle this problem? What makes How to Remodel a Life unique among memoirs is that at the end of each chapter is a toolkit with suggestions to facilitate recovery. So for chapter 1, I delve into those tools I have used in my own recovery, including surrender, don't blame anyone, tread lightly, find a buddy, laugh, be still, and trust. Without totally giving away the contents of How to Remodel a Life, there are 12 chapters, including laying a firm foundation, updating the hardwired mind, letting light in, fixing faulty plumbing, raising the roof, designing the master suite, the guest room, the swing in the backyard, and the new house. Each of the topics is connected to something to do with human recovery and growth, from spirituality to play. One of the most frequently asked questions I get about my book is, where did the idea come from? In 2018, I was working in a bookstore part-time during the holidays. While shelving books, I noticed just how many self-help books there were on this subject, and also how many books on home renovation. I just put the 2 and 2 together and came up with a book that has a unique perspective of presenting similar material. What was my goal in writing How to Remodel a Life? My goal was to create an accessible memoir that didn't just lead the reader to identify with my story, but also allowed them a way out of the hole in which they found themselves. The memoir section is brutally honest and was painful to write, necessarily so, but the tools at the end of each chapter are uplifting because I know they work. What is my hope for How to Remodel a Life? Aside from getting the book into individual readers' hands, I would like to see the book used in treatment centers and recovery groups around the country and beyond. Another frequently asked question is, which came first for me, alcoholism or bipolar disorder? Given that these diseases have a dual modality, I'm not sure that I can say. I know that I had all the symptoms of bipolar disorder in my early teens, but no one discussed them then. So it was not until I was in my early 40s that I was properly diagnosed. As for alcoholism, that was easier to detect, and I fell to my rock bottom much more quickly. By the time I was 25, it was very evident to me and those around me that I could not drink socially, that I was an alcoholic. That is when I joined a 12-step recovery program. Is How to Remodel a Life just for people who suffer from alcoholism and bipolar disorder? Absolutely not. As one reviewer wrote, this powerful and courageous tale serves as a guide for anyone looking to experience more joy and peace in their lives. Through the lens of a home remodel, Hope Andersen's touching and poignant memoir will inspire others to turn their lives around for good. What did I learn about myself in writing this book? I learned that I have probably been bipolar and alcoholic for longer than I originally thought. What were some of the symptoms of my bipolar disorder? In my case, excessive mood swings, extreme sexuality leading to promiscuity, overspending, and suicidal ideation, among others. How did I know I was an alcoholic? I knew I was an alcoholic because I could not take one drink without having many more. I obsessed about alcohol, where I would get my next drink. I tried to quit and could not. I tried changing drinks and it did no good. I blacked out and landed in bed with many strangers. These are only some of the symptoms. When I began to attend 12-step meetings, I immediately felt that I had found my tribe. These people were telling my story. They knew how I felt without knowing me. They had done what I had done. They knew where I belonged. All this is described in the memoir. One last thing before I read my section from my book. My life has been totally transformed over these past almost 40 years, where once I was a totally useless, self-centered person whose life was unbearable. I now have a life that is more than I could possibly have dreamed of. I owe it all to 12-step recovery and to the tools I list in this book. So I'm going to read a selection from the end of the book, the last chapter, which is called The New House. I always like a happy ending. The process of remodeling a home can be expensive, exhausting, and often frustrating. There are months when the kitchen is being redone, for example, where your dishes, pots and pans, glasses, mugs, cutlery, and china are packed away in boxes and shoved behind the Christmas decorations in the basement. You eat out more, gain weight, and grow grumpy with the frequent delays. When the wrong cabinets come in and you have to send out for new ones, another 6 weeks go by and you're ready to tear your hair out. Remodeling is never as seamless as reality television would lead you to believe. Whose reality is it that shows you the process, which really takes several months, if not more, stuffed into an hour-long segment? Intellectually, you know it can't be so. It won't be that easy, but the promise nevertheless lingers. In truth, any kind of remodeling takes at least 3 times as long as you expect it to. There is a rule of thumb that states it takes 90 days to change a habit, 3 months at least. This is true also of both remodeling a house and remodeling a life. So what does that mean to us? Should we not proceed? Should we not make the changes that are going to improve our quality of life? Hell no. Bring it on, I say. Just be prepared for a slow and steady progress. Then at last comes the conclusion. Suddenly, one day, you find yourself walking into your kitchen a month after the builders have left. All the dishes have been put into their proper places. The glassware sparkles through the new glass cupboard doors. Your favorite mug, now visible, beckons you to make a cup of tea. You sit in the comfy chair in the breakfast nook, a space that was never there before the renovation, and look out at this new creation. Gleaming, fresh, inviting. All these positive words pop into your mind. Looking at the little blue vase filled with daffodils that sits on the countertop, you sigh. Peace. That is what all the hardship of remodeling has brought you. Another chapter has come to a close. Peace. When I look back on the decades during which my life has been under construction and still is today, I marvel that I didn't just give up, walk into the ocean, and never come back. There were times when life was so painful, so heavy, I thought I couldn't bear its weight. But I kept going, one step at a time. I had heard the message, stick around until the miracle happens. So I did, waiting for the miracle to occur. Of course, miracles were occurring all the time. I just couldn't always see them. I didn't know then what the miracle would look like, but I think I know now. It is the miracle of sobriety, the miracle of a marriage that stayed together, the miracle of 3 amazing children, the miracle of family and friends. And this is just the beginning. The miracle is how I absolutely trust that the universe is a safe, loving place where there is enough for everyone. It is a place where I am looked after and taken care of every minute, and I don't have to worry, fret, or push anymore. It is the belief that I have in myself all that I need to be happy in any circumstance, to succeed in all efforts, and to accept setbacks graciously as a necessary part of life. In my miracle life, there are no chance encounters. Nothing is either too small to warrant my attention, nor too vast to overwhelm it. There is a reason for all things. My miracle may not be your miracle. You may think I'm just blowing hot air, but my life has taken on a flow of its own. I ride on the back of my higher power who delights in all things good. Mine is a wonderful life, and I hope the tools I have shared with you in this little book help you find your miracle too. I feel free to sit in my comfy chair and look around at my remodeled life, so shiny, so fresh, so inviting. All the hard work it took to get to this point has been worth it. Of course, the remodel is never over. The journey continues. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Hope. I love the way that you've woven these 2 ideas of remodeling together in this book, and the writing is lovely and lyrical, and it's clear that you're paying very close attention. You have been in active sobriety and recovery for how many years now?
39.
39 years. So this is not a small remodeling project. And as you know, it is an ongoing, as you said, it's an ongoing process. You've been learning about yourself for so long and actively working on this. Why was now the time where you felt like you could put it out and share it with the world in published form?
Well, it all came kind of as the result of my husband having liver cancer, and my basically having a spiritual awakening when I was 60 years old. He came very close to death, and we had to face that situation together. And when he managed to survive the liver transplant and went on to become a personal trainer, I was left, having had been a teacher and a caregiver and a mother and everything all these years, I kind of was left with an empty shell. I didn't know who I was or what I was supposed to do, or, what my role in life was anymore. And so I just started writing. And this book is really the book that I needed to get out of my system so that I could write other books, so that I could write happy books and, fiction that would make people laugh and things like that. This book needed to deal with the demons inside me that had been tracking me all my life. And that's kind of why this one came along when it did.
I appreciate that that answer, and I see Nesha nodding her head too. This notion of there are these stories that just need to emerge and get them out of your system. So you said, and I did see a comment that came through. How do you order this book? At the end of the program, we'll put a link in the chat that will allow you to fill out a form to order one or two or all three of these books tonight. So be on the lookout for that before you leave. We can also send it in a follow-up email. Hope, I was particularly struck by your chapter on the rewiring. So, you talk about the need to get rid of the faulty wiring in a home, but also the faulty wiring and the faulty thinking in our heads. And one of the places where you've had to do some rewiring is related to creativity itself, because as someone who is living with bipolar disorder, you have gone through manic phases of tremendous creative production. But you write about the finally feeling like you could not be so afraid of that creative process anymore. Can you talk a little bit more about what creativity looks like in your life now?
Right. Creativity in my life today, I think, is a mixture of discipline and grace. Whereas once upon a time when I was drinking, I thought I had to be wildly drunk in order to create anything worthwhile, and then of course you're under the illusion that everything you write is just like Hemingway. And, but now I just have this practice where I get up and I write 5 pages a day on the book that I'm working on. And I don't do any more and I don't do any less. I just write the 5 pages, whether I'm inspired or not inspired. And the story moves along. And it's really when I have moments of grace that come along and I feel like there's this inspiration that happens in the story and there's something that really clicks, that's always a lot of fun. But if it's not there on that particular day, I still sit down and write my pages because that's what I'm supposed to do. If I'm going to call myself a writer, I need to write. That's what writers do. They write, and so that's basically what it is. It's really simple. And I got that piece of advice from Lawrence Block, the mystery writer, who said, this is how you can write a novel. Just write 5 pages a day, and before you know it, you will have written a book. And that seemed very sensible to me. So that's about as extensive as my process gets. It's just a question of sitting down, turning allowing myself to be a channel for inspiration, and then sitting down and doing the footwork.
Well, we're certainly glad that you did, and that this is one of the results of that discipline and grace. Again, Hope's book is How to Remodel a Life, a guide to living well, not just living, but living well with alcoholism and bipolar disorder. So, and again, I'll put the chat, and there's a comment coming up. It is a gorgeous book. All 3 of these have beautiful cover art. And I love your little anecdote about the cover art itself. Do you want to tell that story quickly, and then we'll turn to Adiba?
Sure. Well, the cover art, I don't know how to tell it quickly, but this was just an example of me being a bulldog. I had an image in my mind of what I wanted for the cover art, and I went to a friend who was an artist, and I told him very specifically what I wanted for the cover. I wanted a wreath on a door that had all the little elements of the chapters in the wreath, and I wanted it to look exactly like that. So he did exactly what I asked him to do, and when he sent it back to me, it was horrible. It was just so awful. And I mean, it was perfectly drawn. He did exactly what I had asked him to do, but it was so wrong. So I talked to my publisher, Mindy Kuhn, and I told her my dilemma, and she said, well, what are you looking for? And I said, I want something abstract, that shows you the evolution from the dark side to the light side. And she came back with this beautiful cover that just is so ethereal and it just catches my attention every time I see it. So that's how that came about.
It was a good example of letting go, right?
Yep,
And giving it over
definitely,
to someone else.
definitely.
Thank you so much, Hope. I'm going to pull in Adiba Barney, who's going to talk a little bit about her book, When Life Hands You Cactuses, and it certainly has, Make Margaritas.
Hey, all right. Thank you so much, Beth, and everyone at Main Street Bookstore in Davidson. Honestly, I feel super honored, and it's a privilege for me to be among real authors, as I call you guys, because I don't really consider myself an author, really. I mean, I just wrote about my life, and English is not even my first language. It's like my third language. So, but I had a story to tell. I've basically lived through more in my 43 years on this earth than many have in a lifetime. So I was encouraged by friend and family to just get it out there and get it on paper. And so I actually wrote this book because I wanted to leave a legacy behind. When I sat down to write it, I did so for many reasons. I have been handed a lot of cactuses throughout my life, but I've also had a lot of exhilarating margaritas. Just love those margaritas. I've had an incredible and fulfilling life with honestly no regrets or should have done this kind of feelings. I can honestly say that now I live with a deadly disease. I don't know when my time is up. It could be a year from now. It could be 10 years from now. We don't know. It depends on where the cancer cells are going to hit next. I do scans every 3 months. So for me, it's really hard to know, how bad it is for each scan that I do. So basically all of us that live with this disease, we live in 3-month intervals. So we're super grateful for every 3 months we get with our loved ones. And so, but I can truly say that if I would pass next year, a year from now, or 3 from now, I could honestly say that I have lived a full life. And as you can read in my book, a lot has happened, even if it's only been a half a life. I have so many amazing, I'm blessed with caring and loving family and group of friends. They've helped me throughout this journey. And I felt like I needed to leave something behind for all of them. But I wrote this book mostly for myself, for my son, and for you. Me, because I felt that I need to cherish and celebrate the life that I have had and still have before it's taken from me. My son, because he will most likely lose me way too soon, probably before he even can remember who I am. And I want him, no matter what, to hear my story with my own words. I think that could help him face and manage his grief. And you, because maybe, just maybe, you will find inspiration from my journey and ways to handle your own challenges in life. You see, my hope is that maybe something in my story can plant a seed of hope in someone else, no matter who they are and what kind of journey they're on. Because of the many challenges I've faced early on in life, I've learned how to not just survive, but most importantly, how to thrive and use the many hurdles as building blocks for a life filled with passion, joy, and strength. And I've actually included all these lessons and learnings I've had in life. The book is about my whole life's journey, basically from the day I was born, but within the book, there are 8 margarita ingredients, as I call them. And those are my tools and insights that I've gained throughout my journey and how, you can overcome challenges and thrive in life despite of them. Just like Beth told you, my book is about, it starts basically when I was born, how my mom was rushed to the hospital from the shelters while the bombs were raining down to the hospital. And how my first year in life was basically experiencing war through a child's eyes, you know, how it was to experience war as a child. So I basically putting it all out there, the pain, the grief, the sorrow, the joy of finally flee that war and come to peace in Sweden, where we fled, like Beth said, on a smuggler's boat. That was the toughest hide and seek game ever for a child. So basically my whole childhood was kind of in that environment. And how it then was to be an immigrant in Sweden. I mean, as you can see, I'm not blonde, I'm not blue-eyed. And in Sweden, that's, you know, that's the norm. So it was very tough to come there as an immigrant, and how, you know, we bullied and I was beaten. I would come home with broken glasses and bruises, and I would tell my parents, you know, I got them from playing soccer and being, you know, tackled roughly, when in fact I was actually being bullied in school and beaten for being different. And I was told to go back where I came from. So that of course was tough. At the same time, it was wonderful to know that we were in a peaceful country and having a life that might have been taken completely from us if we stayed in that war. And I'm also in the book explaining how it was to live between two cultures. I mean, I came from a Middle Eastern culture where the honor culture, patriarchal, very conservative, Christian, but still very strict and conservative culture that I grew up in, where my dad was the boss and everything he says goes, and girls definitely do not do anything. Boys can, but girls not. And, you know, they had to approve of who I would marry someday. They had to do all these different things, and I was not allowed out, you know, socially or any of those things, and how I had to basically be strategic already as a teenager in how I would gain my freedom and my independence. So you can read about all the little strategic moves I did while being very young, and how I did actually gain my independence and change my parents' view, which was very special because I have younger sisters and I wanted them to have a better life than me. I wanted them to gain more freedom in their life and do what they wanted and love who they wanted. I also tell about 3 of my amazing love stories. And one is, of course, with my second husband now, Chris. My mother-in-law is watching. He's obviously the best man of the 3 love stories I've had. This is the best love story ever of all times. No, but seriously, it's like, you know, love and heartbreak, divorce, and man that came in at the right time, being, you know, my knight in shining armor and all these things. So you will follow all the feelings I have, all the emotions and everything that happened. Crazy little adventures with my loves. One of the main things that have followed me since I was 25 is that I have had a huge longing for a child, but I struggled with infertility. So that was another one of my challenges, is that I just couldn't have a child, and there was no real explanation for it, no physical explanation for it. I just could not get pregnant, not even with IVF. So I've honestly had embryos with 3 different men, 3 sets of embryos in the freezer throughout my lifetime. And so obviously after 15 years and finally becoming a mother at the age of 41, after I struggled so long, with the help of our own embryos, our biological child, and an amazing surrogate that was at the same time living with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer while this happened, and going through all the guilt and all the emotion that comes with, you know, choosing to bring a child into this life, not knowing how long I would be here for this child. That was very tough. And you can follow in the book how, we came to that decision, me and my husband, Chris, and how tough it was basically, but how we have no regrets. And we are so blessed and grateful and overjoyed that we have this little boy in our lives. It has changed everything. I will fight to stay alive for him. It's like he's become my, I will do anything. All the side effects I go through are nothing as long as I get to live and stay alive for him. But you also get to follow the badass career me, which is basically, I've done an amazing career in the tech industry, and I worked hard in Sweden, and that led me to becoming a CEO in Silicon Valley, and how I then had to give it up because of being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It was pretty impossible to combine those two. So, I can tell you about, I'm jumping from here and there, but you'll be able to read my whole journey chronologically in the book. But I was diagnosed stage 1 breast cancer already at age 27. And then I had a recurrence, still stage 1, 3 years later. And then 7 years after that, I was stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. So despite being cured and being titled a survivor, I had not survived. And that is because 30% of everyone that's gone through early stage breast cancer will become stage 4 at some point. It can happen 10, 15, 20 years after your first diagnosis. There are no guarantees, unfortunately. But you get to follow all my breast cancer journeys and the crazy things I did to bring joy into the tough cancer, trauma that you go through, the parties I organized, the travels I did. Basically, my whole life has been a big adventure, from one thing to another. And then, of course, it all kind of culminates into becoming a mother and everything that comes with that. I'm now living in suburbia and, in Cornelius, in a small town. And that was not really what I had planned in life, but I am more than grateful what all the changes in my life have brought me to this point. And that's what my margarita ingredients are all about, is basically that, finding that change can be a good thing. All these things that happened in my life where, I'm divorced at 30 and not a mother yet, even though that I had fought so hard to be that, and the breast cancer and all these things that happened. These were all changes. These were all new chapters in my life that I had to readjust and make the best out of it. And this is how I tell in my margarita ingredients how you can actually live an amazing life despite all the things that happen in your life. I will go ahead and read one of my chapters here. Let's start with Child of War. Where did my childhood go? I was born into a terrifying world where bombs constantly rained down all around. For the first 7 years of my life, this was the only existence I knew. These years were far from what most people would ever experience during a typical childhood. I was surrounded by so much tragedy during this time. Many of my parents' friends died. Entire families were killed. I experienced unspeakable terror and trauma at such an early age. Most of it I don't remember, even from the age when most children do start remembering. I can recall a few fragments here and there, but they feel more like dreams or nightmares, really, and not actual events. My mom and dad have told me about our life during those years. the parts that I have suppressed deep in my brain somewhere, a place that I dare not open even when I returned to visit Beirut, Lebanon for the first time in September 2016 after we fled in 1984. The war had an unforgettable and lasting impact on the early years of my life. One of the most terrifying memories I have from the war is waking up abruptly because the wall next to my bed was shaking hard from the bombs that were coming down. I remember my whole body trembling and feeling as if my heart was in my throat, terrified that they would hit our building next. Knowing we had mere moments before that could happen, we fled our home, taking only what we could hold in our arms, and ran across the street to the entrance of the underground shelter, hoping we would make it to safety in time. Safety for us was a cramped, stuffy underground room where we lived for weeks, sometimes months at a time. There were nonstop noises inside and out. We ate whatever canned food we could come by, passing the days while the bombing continued outside our windowless space. It was even dangerous to venture out to get water from the well that was only 100 meters, 328 feet, from the shelter. To get it meant that someone had to run to the well, retrieve the water, and get back while avoiding the bombs. My dad narrowly escaped being hit on several occasions while getting water for us. Our goal was to survive, and we did everything possible to make sure we did. We held tight to the hope that we would survive somehow. In the shelter, us kids had to learn how to creatively play in small spaces with whatever toy we had been able to bring with us. The adults also found ways to occupy their time, telling stories, singing, and playing games. My mom told me that her love of card games came from the many hours she spent playing with the neighbors who were with us in the tiny shelter. We all entertained ourselves amid a vast area of people's belongings that filled the crowded space, a mix of clothes, toys, food supplies, and mattresses that literally covered every surface of the shelter floor. I'll just read a little bit from that, and then I will jump many years into the future to when I found out that I had stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And this is in chapter 23, Breast Cancer Strike 3, Sentenced to Death at 37. The next day, I received the most surreal phone call of my life. The news from the radiologist was unbelievable. They were pretty certain I had metastases in my bones. But how? When? Why? They told me that the cancer cells had most likely traveled through my blood back in 2008, maybe even earlier. They had been dormant, waiting, so it was difficult to know when they started metastasizing. Really? I had stage 4 metastatic breast cancer? Did I just get sentenced to death? There is no cure. I'm only 37. This was the absolute worst news I could have ever received. No more future. I was never going to be a mom. The only question was, when would it kill me? Chris and I could not believe it. We both collapsed on the floor, holding each other. We were in shock and did not want to accept the news. This can't be happening. I recall hearing my mom and Chris's mom crying in the background. That's all I remember from those days, the days when I realized that I might not live to see my 40th birthday, knowing I will die young. And then to make it a little bit more joyful, I will jump to chapter 26, Memory Bank Overload, Travels and Fun with Loved Ones. Besides finding a new purpose in my life, I knew I needed to brighten my days with having fun experiences, traveling to great destinations, and creating even more amazing memories with my loved ones. Being depressed was not something I would allow to continue in my life. Every other time I had faced difficult challenges, I had refused to let myself stay in a dark place. Yes, my dreams were shattered, but I was determined to feel happiness again. I believe we have power over how we feel. We can manipulate our brain and choose how to think about what we're going through. Of course, if the depression is clinical and professional help is needed, that is different. I think most people who are unhappy walk around thinking negative thoughts, choose to see darkness instead of light, and choose to dwell in their misery instead of actively changing their situation. I decided to start thinking about all the amazing experiences I had had in my lifetime. It was amazing how many wonderful and incredible things that had happened in my relatively short life. I wasn't even 40. I realized that I had squeezed more into my life than most people did in an entire lifetime. I decided right then and there that I was not dead yet, so I would not act like I was. I had to keep living while I could. I decided I was actually going to live the hell out of life. I was going to do things I had never had time to do before because I had always been working. Now I was on disability and I had no responsibility. I had never had time for hobbies or other travels with family and friends, but I did now. Just a little bit from, I don't even know what I am on time. Beth, where are you? Am I good on time?
We're okay. But I am going to jump in and ask you some questions at this point.
Okay, great.
Okay. So I think everyone who's here can probably pick up on the tremendous and remarkable gratitude and optimism that you carry with you, or that has carried you, despite the just incredible challenges and devastation that you faced in your life. One of the pieces where your candor and gratitude really jumped out to me initially was when you talked about your past loves. And I know your mother-in-law is here, so fair warning. But I was really struck by the way you were able to speak about those relationships from a total place of gratitude. And so I wondered if the gratitude or the peace kind of came first and then you could write about it, or if writing about it helped bring you to a new peace with those relationships.
So for me, I've never been a bitter person. I just read in this last chapter here that I read for you is, I don't feel bitterness or dwell on things that have been, or I try to look at what was the amazing things, what are the beautiful memories that I can take from each experience that I've had in my life. And I honestly believe that that has helped me move forward and really thrive in life and always have happiness in my heart, in my soul, because I feel like I could have chosen to just, be bitter and dwell on it and not move past it. But for some reason, with every single challenge that I've faced, I've gotten new tools to move on, faster from each challenge. And therefore, yeah, sure, my ex-husband, cheated on me with his childhood friend. I could have been very sad about that and been all, pissed and not written a single good thing about him. But we had 10 amazing years together. And I choose to see that. I, of course, would never take him back. Doesn't mean that I would ever, but at the same time, he actually did try at some point 2 years after he left me, but I did not put that in the book. But all these different relationships I've had, all these different experiences I've had in life, all these changes that have happened, they have opened up for experiencing new amazing things in life for me. I would not have been in the US. I would not have met my amazing husband, Chris. I would not have had my little Alex. I would not have had, the amazing career I had in Silicon Valley if this and this and this. So I try not to think about and stay in the past. I live for the future, and I live for what I have in the moment. So I'll stop there because I have
That's
8
wonderful.
margarita ingredients about this.
That's great. There's a whole book about this, actually.
Yeah.
One last thing before we move to Nesha, and that is you are very clear that you are not a cancer survivor or not even battling cancer. This is something that you live with. You call it at one point the really annoying roommate. So knowing that, living with that reality has made your bucket list and your goals and your hopes and dreams all the more urgent. So my question for you is, in this crazy year, you mentioned trips that were canceled in 2020, and in this time, how have you turned the cactuses of COVID into margaritas? Are there any positives from this past crazy year?
Yeah, obviously I'm very angry with COVID because we did have my husband took a sabbatical, 6 months to go travel around the world. We had all these amazing, safari in Africa, RVing all around New Zealand and Japan, and you name it. We had 6 months of travels around the world that we couldn't do, and we had to cancel due to COVID. But thankfully, I'm still alive, and we will just make it happen in a different way. We'll go to New Zealand this year and safari next year, and so on and so on. So we'll just kind of space them out. What did happen instead is that we got into the car and did road trips, a lot of road trips. So we've been exploring, surrounding areas, and I've had a chance to focus on that. And honestly, I don't think I would have had time to write my book if COVID didn't happen. So it was just pretty lucky that COVID happened, but at the same time that I decided that I would go ahead and write a book. So, something good came out of it, right? So that's, the positive view that I have from COVID is that I actually managed to write this book finally. I started writing it 4 years ago, and because my girlfriends, I have a group of my besties, as they call them in Sweden, that they sent me this care package back in 2016 that had 24, this was just before Christmas, with 24 like calendar and gifts in each one. And one of the day's gifts were a notebook. And I opened the notebook, and they had written the title that I've always said, if I write a book about my life, it would be When Life Hands You Cactuses, Make Margaritas, because that's how I see my life. And I opened this notebook, and it says the title and start writing this book. God damn it, but in Swedish. And that's how, so I started writing it. But 4 years ago, Alex was not even in our thoughts because, my first line of treatment had failed, and I was depressed and miserable and all these things, and did not think that I would ever have a chance to become a mom. And then, so I stopped writing. I just wasn't inspired to write anymore. And now, fast forward, COVID, I started writing my book. I felt like my life was complete now. I had it all. So,
and here it is.
Yeah,
Adiba, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I mean, the
you
ride is it is quite a ride, and we appreciate that you captured it both for your son and for us. Again, her book is When Life Hands You Cactuses, Make Margaritas. And Ada did put the order link into the chat. So if you want to order any of these books tonight, just fill out that order form. Adiba, thank you so much. And I'm going to move over to our third and final writer tonight, Nesha Pai. This is another beautiful cover. And her book also has her own unique spin on turning negatives into positives, for sure. And so it's overcoming ordinary obstacles. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nesha, and then I've got a couple questions for her.
Thank you, Main Street Books. Thank you, fellow amazing authors. I'm not even sure how to go after Hope and Adiba at this point. Amazing, amazing, blown away. Thank you. My mom is here and some of my friends. And so thank you for being here. I know it's almost 8 o'clock and I want to be respectful of your time because I know most people are zoomed out around now. But I wrote my book. It just came out in January of 2020. In November of 2020, it won the American Book Fest Multicultural Nonfiction Award through Spark Publications. And this book is it's my baby next to my baby. And I wrote this not only as a legacy for my son, but I wrote it as a way to heal. And in writing this book, parts of my heart were healed that I didn't know needed healing. And I wrote this book. It's called Overcoming Ordinary Obstacles because in my almost 50 years, I've been lucky not to come directly face to face with a terminal illness, with grief, with something catastrophic. But I wrote it to relate to primarily other women, maybe even ethnic women, in the things that I faced. Sexism, racism, divorce, postpartum depression, being forced to leave a career to start my own company. And most of my life was me searching for identity as a first-gen Indian woman. So the most interesting thing, a reward, I should say, about my book is I am touching a demographic that I never even wrote for, and that is the millennial Caucasian male. I actually had a young man reach out to me who is an accountant here in Charlotte and wrote me the longest, most beautiful review on Amazon about how my book changed his life. And what's awesome about that is my book wasn't even intended for him. So you never know who you're going to touch. And that is what is amazing to me. I wanted to read a excerpt from chapter 2. And chapter 2 is searching for identity, which I spent most of my life doing, and I finally found it. Since the first colonists set foot on American soil, immigrants have struggled to balance blending in with maintaining the cultural heritage of their homelands. That struggle is evident in the discrimination, segregation, and violence we've seen throughout our nation's history. It feels strange, though, for the immigrant. Overcoming this obstacle is an intimate and very personal process, but our society makes it so very public. My dad was a textile engineer. When he came to America, he landed in New York City, and then he attended school in Massachusetts, securing his first jobs in Connecticut and Maryland. All the textile plants were in the South, so he eventually put his roots down in Greenville, Tennessee, a small mountain valley town in the eastern tip of the state. He ended up getting a high-paying job at a big pulp paper plant there. I would always get upset with my father over the years because I always wished I grew up in New York City. I joked that my soul was actually born there. Greenville was a sleepy town that prided itself on the extra E in its name, being the adult home of Andrew Johnson and having a winning high school football team, the Green Devils. It was a safe place to grow up. We never locked our doors, and we kids were allowed to play out in the streets of our neighborhood all day and evening. Being one of only a handful of Indian families, everyone knew us by name. One of our Indian neighbors, the Kumars, had 2 daughters, Nita and Ruchi, who became lifelong friends to me. Another Indian family owned a motel in town. Our 3 families would hold gatherings on weekends with the mothers making big Indian meals to share. It created a feeling of belonging and the familiarity of home for my parents, who deeply missed their community back in India. The biggest thing missing was having access to our extended family. I never got to know my grandparents that well, and they never really got to know me. We were known as the American grandkids and cousins who would visit 3 months at a time each summer of our childhood. I was always envious of my American friends who had close bonds with their extended family, especially their grandparents. Instead, we knew most of the Indians in East Tennessee, and we would travel between Newport, Kingsport, and Morristown to visit as many of the families as we could, because these families came from different parts of India. None of our parents spoke the same dialect or participated in exactly the same customs, but they shared a special bond. They were fresh off the boat Indians looking for friendship and a sense of community. We had a great childhood. Our parents did an incredible job of assimilating into the small southern town, and we celebrated all of the American holidays. My parents always hosted Christmas Eve parties for the neighborhood in our home, and my dad would invite everyone. He loved welcoming people and making them laugh. Holiday parties were also full of joy, laughter, Christmas music, and plenty of scotch for the adults. After everyone left, we would stay up late and open our gifts. My dad made sure every detail was taken care of for these family festive celebrations. We fit well into our community without any problems or concerns. Our next door neighbors, the Kites, were a lovely family that took us in and showed us the ropes of American life. The daughter, Kimber, was at least 6 years older than me, and I looked up to her. She spent a lot of time with my mom because she wanted to learn more about the Indian culture. And I, in turn, loved it because I wanted to learn more about the American culture. One of our neighbors was the pastor of the First Christian Church in town, and he was especially kind to us. He convinced my devout Hindu parents to allow us kids to go to summer vacation Bible school. I have fond memories of that experience. I loved learning about Jesus, making crafts, and eating snacks with new friends. As a child, I looked forward to it every summer. My parents wanted the best possible life for my siblings and me, so they entertained all of our childhood curiosities. For example, at age 4, I fell in love with style, fashion, and design. I asked my mom to take me to Woolworth and buy me big mint green earrings and mint green eyeshadow. That was the it color in the 70s, which she graciously did. My mother also liked to dress me in flamboyant Indian attire, always paired with ruby red Mary Jane shoes. I was a fashionably dressed little girl with a cunning mind and a bold personality. At a young age, I began developing leadership skills, especially with my twin brother. Poor Neil, he believed everything I said. He was always getting into trouble because I'd set him up or blame him for something I did. My dad taught me the essence of living a beautifully curated life. His prized possession was his Emilio Pucci limited edition silver Lincoln Continental. I remember him washing and waxing that car every weekend. Dad wanted to enjoy the rewards of his hard work and celebrate the freedom of choice he'd earned in this new country. While he rarely splurged on himself, he definitely bought his dream car and got a good deal on it. Coming from a country where negotiations are involved in every purchase, my dad knew how to negotiate, and he is both book smart and street smart. While growing up in Greenville, my best friends, Anna, Leslie, and Tara, introduced me to all kinds of American culture. Anna's actually on here. Hey, Anna. Including dance, doll houses, fashion, and music. I learned to twirl the baton and play the flute. My parents made sure I had whatever was popular at that time or whatever helped me fit in, whether it was a music record, a preppy fashion item, or a Madame Alexandra doll. We were given all we needed, and we were never denied anything we wanted to try. During these young, innocent years, life usually went just the way I wanted it to. And that is in my chapter of searching for identity.
Thank you, Nesha. Much of the book deals with this from different angles. You know, you keep circling back to this idea of not really feeling like you fit in anywhere, which I think is probably a common experience for first generation Americans. You know, they don't quite
Absolutely.
feel connected to their home culture. They don't quite feel American enough, whatever that means. And so you spend a lot of time exploring that. And within religion too, you know, your family are Hindu, many friends that you later encounter and who are important to you are Christian. You don't quite, for a while, feel like you fit in either of those as well. Brene Brown, who's a writer that I love, wrote a book on this called Braving the Wilderness, and she talks about the difference between fitting in and belonging. And I do think that by the end of your book, you have, through your storytelling, a sense of belonging. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you now and how you found it?
Yeah, I love Brene Brown. I love that question. I spent most of my life trying to fit in to a mold, I wasn't the proper Indian girl. I wasn't fully white and American. And I know a lot of my first generation cohorts feel the same, that we didn't know where we fit in. We tried to fit into a box. And every time we tried to fit into this box, it would be rejection and failure. I feel like belonging, because I've studied a lot of what Brene Brown, I haven't read the book yet, but I've studied a lot of her works. And belonging is defined so beautifully as believing in yourself from deeply within and who you are, and that you do have a right and a space in this world. And it is not determined by external sources. It is not determined by acceptance from external sources. It's really accepting yourself and your higher power, knowing that you're, fearfully and wonderfully made, and that there is no mistake on who you are. And so it took me many years to get there. But once I finally figured that out, I realized, we all belong. We all belong here.
I love that answer. And it leads me to my last question, which is that your voice alternates in your writing between, it's very candid and it's funny, it's self-effacing. So you're writing about yourself and your own process, but it also you have the voice of a coach. And so in the questions, each of her chapters ends with these kind of probing questions that the reader turns on him or herself. And so writing in this way, where you're, examining yourself and then offering these questions, which section was the most challenging to look at from that perspective? Like which one was the hardest to work through in your own story? And then which was maybe the hardest in terms of how does this go from becoming my story to something that other people can connect to?
Yeah, I think writing about oneself is always hard because it forces us to face inside. And so coming up with the questions at the end of each chapter kind of came midway through, because I didn't want to just talk about myself. I wanted to share a story, and I wanted to relate to the reader, and I wanted the reader to find ways through my probing questions of how they could relate to me in that chapter. So maybe someone wasn't Hindu, or maybe someone wasn't maybe not a female, but they might have gone through some similar experiences. So it's always easier to do the coaching part, or to ask the questions of someone else instead of having the mirror on ourselves. So yeah, definitely writing the stories about myself were challenging, because, it's painful. It's painful to turn the mirror on yourself sometimes.
Yes, I see Hope and Adiba both nodding as well. All three of these books, I'm going to hold up Nesha's again. This beautiful. Tell me about this lion.
Yeah, the lion, Spark Publication. This is actually my logo, but the lion is significant in Hinduism. It's the vehicle of the goddess Durga, which is she's like the main beautiful goddess, and very powerful. And also in Christianity, right? It's the lion that is depicted in the Bible, and it means courage, right? The Lion and the Wizard of Oz. So it takes courage, just like the other two authors said, it takes courage to overcome the obstacles that come our way. And the lion, to me, depicts courage.
That's awesome. All three of these books have funny moments and painful moments, and I think we all have much to learn from all three of you in the ways that you've shared your stories, all from a place of gratitude, wanting to share your own stories for others so that your story might inspire others. I'm going to very quickly turn to the chat to see if we have any quick questions, cognizant of the time and knowing that we are all zoomed out these days. If anyone has any questions they'd like to drop in the chat, I'm happy to field them for our three writers. Also, if you scroll back up, and Ada put into the chat the order form too. And we also have these books in the shop right now. And they'll be here. And if we need to have more dropped off, we can get more. So we hope that people will pick up these stories. They're so inspiring. The chat, I hope you all can scroll back up. The chat is not full of questions. It's full of a lot of very enthusiastic praise and celebration. So I think we'll leave it at that. I'm so grateful to all three of you and audience, those of you who came out tonight. Yes, my own mother is here actually, and she says, 3 courageous and strong women, thank you. And I wholeheartedly agree.